The strongest chains aren't made of iron. They're made of desire. You don't realize it, but every time you wake up thinking about who will notice you, how many likes you'll get, how many messages you'll receive, you've already put your neck on a leash. The modern matrix doesn't need guards, walls, or weapons. It just needs to keep you excited, distracted, and always hungry. Lust is the perfect hook. It holds you painlessly, and the more you fight, the more trapped you become. You believe you're choosing freely, but every click, every swipe, every search for validation is programmed to rob you of focus, energy, and time. By the end of the day, you're tired, empty, and even more dependent. Machiavelli would understand this clearly. He would say that the prince rules because he controls impulses, while the subject is ruled because he obeys them. Those who decide for immediate pleasure become subjects of the system. Those who rule over desire rule the game. And now, I ask you, in how many areas of your life have you noticed that lust has made you lose power? Was it in relationships where you accepted less than you deserved to avoid losing sex? Was it in your routine where you traded precious hours for screens that only distract you? Or was it in money, spent on empty promises of status and beauty? Write in the comments. Naming the enemy is the first step to cutting it off, because the Matrix knows if you control your desire, you control your entire life. Desire is the cheapest and, at the same time, the most effective chain. It doesn't need to be imposed by force because it originates within you. Waking up and going to sleep thinking about who will validate you today. How many messages, how many glances, how many confirmations that you're still worth something. At first, it seems merely human. But when the ritual repeats itself daily, it becomes a leash. The system, this invisible matrix that surrounds you, knows exactly how to exploit this hunger. It doesn't need to give you much, just small doses, a notification, a compliment, a hint, just enough to keep you coming back, begging without realizing it. And at the end of the day, the result is always the same: exhaustion and emptiness. You feel used, but still look for the next bait. Machiavelli would say that there is nothing more dangerous for a ruler than a subject who does not govern himself. Those who cannot control their own impulses have already surrendered the key to their own will, because those who control their desires control their agenda. And if they control their agenda, they control their life. That's why you need to experience coolness. 72 hours of detox. Cut out the obvious triggers, profiles that excite you, websites that drain you, insinuating conversations that only sap energy. Replace them with concrete deliverables, an organized house, a completed workout, 2 to-dos crossed off the list, small visible victories that feed the mind with reality, not illusion. The hungry fish doesn't bite because the hook is strong. It bites because it's hungry. It's hunger without protocol that turns it into prey. When you create rules, when you choose what you'll consume, you're no longer the fish. You become the fisherman. And I want you to reflect. Where has lust ever become a leash in your life? Was it in the time you waste scrolling endlessly? Was it in the relationships that drain your energy? Was it in the obsession with being desired? Leave a comment. Naming the leash is the first cut in the chain. But if the hook doesn't completely grab you, the Matrix has another, even more effective trick: cheap dopamine, the invisible sugar that keeps you lying there, believing you're alive. Have you ever noticed how 5 minutes of scrolling turns into a whole hour? You promise yourself just a little more, and before you know it, your mind is numb, your body heavy, and your will drained. This is the Matrix's most sophisticated trap. It doesn't need to give you great pleasure. It just offers small stimuli, repeated endlessly, until your life is swallowed by nothingness. The logic is simple. The less pleasure, the more repetition. Likes, short videos, notifications, quick hits of dopamine. These are micro rewards that never satisfy, but always draw you back. So you don't create, you don't build, you don't decide, you just consume. And the more you consume, the more docile you become. Machiavelli already understood this in another context. People kept distracted by cheap pleasures rarely realize they are being governed. The most dangerous enemy is not the visible tyrant, but the constant entertainment that keeps the subject quiet. That's why you need to establish your own currency. The rule is simple and hard. 2 social media visits per day, 20 minutes each, and, in return, 2 big-time rewards per week. Not crumbs, not distractions, real results. A project delivered, a sum saved, a meaningful encounter that leaves a mark. This is the difference between cheap dopamine and achievements that build power. Beware of noble justifications. It's networking. It's just humor. It's research. These are perfumes sprayed around the collar, but the collar doesn't change its nature just because it smells nice. Imagine a patient hooked up to an IV. Instead of medication, sugar drops drip into the tube. They don't kill you, but they don't let you get up either. You lie there, believing you're being cared for, while you waste every day of your life. This is how the matrix works. It doesn't destroy you outright. It just keeps you weak enough to never break free. Now think, how much of your routine is made up of small distractions disguised as necessities? Write in the comments, because only when you recognize the sugar in the serum do you have the courage to pull out the needle. But there's an even deeper prison. It's not just cheap dopamine that weakens you, but mismanaged sexual desire, humanity's most powerful instinct, when captured by the matrix, becomes the heaviest chain you can carry. Few men realize how much of their strength is being drained by the constant search for relief. You feel the tension build, rushing for quick pleasure, and for a few minutes you believe you're free. But soon afterward comes guilt, apathy, and a loss of focus. The cycle begins again. Desire, escape, emptiness. This is how the matrix keeps you productive only for others, never for yourself. Machiavelli wouldn't call desire the enemy. He'd call it raw material. Lust only enslaves you because it's directionless. Like water from a dam without a floodgate, it floods and destroys everything. But when contained and redirected, it moves turbines, generates energy, and builds entire cities. The problem was never feeling. The problem is giving in without a government. And you can practice this. 21 days of mastery. It's not forced abstinence, it's chosen sovereignty. First, channel. A short workout every day. A difficult task completed before noon. Burn pent-up energy in victory, not waste. Second, create friction. Take your cell phone out of the bedroom. When your mind cries out for escape, face a cold shower. It's the shock that cuts off the automatic impulse. Third, visible commitment. A mastery days chart. Mark each day completed as if it were a medal. The brain respects what it sees. Think again about water. Without discipline, it sweeps away houses, drowns men, and devastates lands. With a floodgate, it illuminates entire cities. Your desire can be a current or a motor. The choice is yours. Now reflect. How many hours, opportunities, and relationships have you sacrificed for the sake of immediate gratification? How many projects have died because you couldn't control your instincts? Write in the comments. Recognizing waste is the beginning of transformation. And when you learn to control desire, you discover something even darker. Often, it's not networks or impulses that hold you captive. It's people, relationships that survive not because of the value they bring, but because of the crumbs of seduction they give you to keep you captive. Have you ever noticed how some people don't need to offer true love or genuine respect to keep you hooked? Crumbs are enough. A little attention, a night of intimacy, a vague promise of a future, and you, afraid of losing sex, status, or companionship, tolerate disrespect, lack of reciprocity, even humiliation. This is the theater of seduction, not a spectacle of great passion, but of calculated crumbs. You pay with time, peace, and money. They deliver just enough to keep you waiting for the next act. The Matrix doesn't need to chain you when you yourself become an extra in a mediocre play. Machiavelli would say that true power lies in deciding who deserves access and when. If you don't set gates, anyone can enter. And if anyone can enter, your home ceases to be a fortress and becomes a cheap inn. That's why you need silent exit protocols. First, an objective limit. I'll do X to Y. Beyond that, I'm out. Clarity. Second, an access gate. Anyone who doesn't pay the minimum toll, RSI, contribute, actually show up, loses a spot on your agenda. Third, no stage, no public fights, no long emotional discussions. A short, direct, one-on-one conversation. And if there's no change, consequences apply. No spectacle, just decree. Think of a casino without a clock. Inside, you lose track of time, continuing to play even when you're broke, because the environment is designed to trap you. Relationships like this work the same way. If you don't carry your own clock, if you don't have your own limits, your own rules, you lose the night, you lose your wallet, you lose your dignity. Now I want you to think, in which relationships have you accepted less than you deserve just to avoid losing a scrap of attention? How many times have you been a supporting character in someone's life who doesn't deserve a place in yours? Write in the comments. Because the first step to getting out of this mess is recognizing that you're on the wrong stage. But the prison doesn't end there. The same market that creates distractions and empty relationships has also found a way to profit from your neediness, and it turns your pursuit of desire into an entire industry that consumes your money, your energy, and your freedom. Stop for a moment and observe the world around you. How many products, services, and promises revolve around your fear of being unwanted? Gyms that don't sell health, but bodies for approval. Subscriptions that offer no content, but cheap stimuli to keep you trapped. Gifts bought out of guilt. Empty encounters financed by insecurity. This is the workings of the Matrix, transforming your need into savings. The more anxious you are to be seen, the more predictable your spending becomes. The more predictable it is, the easier it is to manage. You think you're buying status, but you're renting a leash. With each new purchase, you surrender pieces of your freedom, card after card, installment after installment. Machiavelli would say that those who govern an anxious people don't need an army. It's enough to sell promises packaged in desire. The subject enslaves himself, convinced he's buying power, when in reality, he's only financing someone else's throne. And you can break this with practical discipline. First, a desire budget. Set a small weekly limit for vanity and entertainment. If it doesn't fit, don't buy it. Second, buy a mirror. Only invest in something that increases real power, time, health, skill. The rest is just makeup for insecurity. Third, a dry week, 7 days a month without any impulse purchases. The shock is brutal. but it shows how much of your life has been spent on illusions. Imagine a road that seems free. You drive believing it's free, but at every corner there's an invisible toll, a small debit, a disguised fee. At the end of the trip, you realize there's nothing left in your account. This is how the lust economy works. It doesn't charge you all at once, but slices up your freedom in installments until you have nothing left. Now reflect. How much of your money has been used to buy borrowed desire? How many times have you tried to pay for respect, attention, acceptance? Write in the comments. Naming these invisible tolls is the beginning of your freedom. But all financial protection, all disconnection, leads to one inevitable point. You will only be free when you no longer need to be desired to make decisions. This is the inner throne, the fortress that is not built with walls, but with discipline and personal sovereignty. This is the point almost no one reaches, because while desire still dictates your choices, you live reacting to the look that approves, the silence that rejects, the touch that seduces, the absence that threatens. But when you govern yourself, you discover that power isn't about being desired. Power is about being enough. The fear of loneliness is the Matrix's final whip. It's what makes you accept crumbs, remain in dead bonds, buy into promises wrapped in glitter. It's what weakens your voice, because deep down, each sim that you didn't want to give is born from this fear, the fear of being alone. Machiavelli would understand this as few others do. He knew that the prince who begs for love becomes captive to his subjects, but the prince who respects himself alone rules even in silence. Because when you don't need an audience, the whole world begins to measure your words. The inner throne is built on simple but non-negotiable commitments. First, sacred sleep, a fixed schedule that you protect like law. Second, a healthy body, daily movement, not for show, but to keep the fortress standing. Third, visible work, one public delivery per week, something the world cannot ignore. Fourth, daily silence, 20 minutes without a screen, just you and your own mind. It is in these minutes that your inner voice grows stronger. In 30 days, your posture changes. In 60, your schedule transforms. In 90, others begin to bow down, not because you asked, but because your discipline speaks for you. Think of the lighthouse on the cliff. It doesn't beg ships to see it. It doesn't seduce. It doesn't chase. It just stays lit. And precisely because it doesn't move, everyone around it adjusts its course. Now I want you to reflect. How much of your life today is driven by the fear of not being wanted? And what would change if for 30 days you lived like that beacon, steadfast, silent, non-negotiable? Write in the comments, because naming this fear is like cutting your throat. And here's the final truth. Those who rule their own desire rule all games. Those who are ruled by it will always be slaves to the matrix. Have you noticed how every current we explore here stems from the same point? Ungoverned desire, the lust that seems harmless at first, a like, a message, a promise of pleasure, but that, when accumulated, turns you into a servant. This is how the matrix works. It doesn't use iron shackles. It uses your own uncontrolled desires. The first leash is the hook of desire. You wake up hungry for validation, and every scrap becomes enough to keep you hooked. Then comes the cheap dopamine, which keeps you distracted in cycles of small pleasure, repeated until exhaustion. When that's not enough, it captures your sexual energy, diverting your mind's most powerful engine to reliefs that only leave you weaker. And if resistance still lingers, it uses people. Relationships that survive by selling crumbs of attention, keeping you captive through fear of losing sex, companionship, or status. Then the entire market shifts to selling products and promises that only fuel your neediness. And in the end, all that's left is the fear of loneliness, which makes you accept everything except freedom. But Machiavelli already warned us, power lies not in pleasing, nor in yielding, nor in begging. Power arises in the silence of discipline, in the inner throne that does not need to be desired to decide. Those who govern themselves do not ask permission. They proclaim, fulfill, and follow. What I want you to take away from this is simple. If you don't control your desire, someone else will control you. If you don't hold your lighthouse high, you'll spend your life adrift, crashing into rocks others have chosen for your path. Now I ask you, which of these chains still binds you most tightly? The search for validation, cheap pleasure, the fear of loneliness? Write in the comments, because when you name your chain, it already begins to weaken. And if this message resonated with you, subscribe to the channel. Here I don't offer consolation, I offer weapons, because the man who controls his own desire cannot be stopped, cannot be bent, cannot be enslaved by the matrix. Those who are self-sufficient are respected. Those who govern themselves govern the game.